Good evening. I'm Alexa Sekura, head of the Scholars Program at the Getty Research Institute, and I would like to welcome you to the third in our four-part series of Fred Zinnemann's Cinema of Resistance, an event developed and curated by Getty scholar Jennifer Smyth and part of the GRI's program theme of artistic practice. Fred Zinnemann believed that filmmaking was essentially a craft and that Hollywood at its best operated in the tradition of the European guilds. He once said that he moved from apprentice to journeyman, then to craftsman, and finally to master over a period of many years in the studios, and that artistry was truly rare. He drew from unique visual resources, grounded in his European heritage, approaching questions of perspective and subjectivity, portraiture and heroism in ways his Hollywood colleagues did not. Zinnemann's artistic practice was unique in Hollywood, and this film series demonstrates his development and mastery of a new form of historical cinema and a film vision deeply indebted to a complex Euro-American intellectual and artistic practice. At this point, I would like to thank the team that helped to put the series together. It's first of all Raquel Zamora, Sabine Schlosser, Jennifer Smyth, Michelle Famey, Ryan Liu, Rebecca Zamora, Rachel Longacre, Janie Roston, Amy Hood, Alicia Hutro and Liz McDermott, Barry Rosen, Heather Alvear, Sam Herod, Steph Dearden, and Michael Easley. I also would like to thank our guests, Maria Janis, daughter of Gary Cooper, and Tim Zinnemann, son of Fred Zinnemann, for being so generous with their time and knowledge and for joining the panel tonight. But most important, I would like to thank our scholar, Jennifer Smyth, for putting together the 4 screenings and for bringing together such an amazing group of participants to the Getty Center. Before I introduce Jennifer, I would like to remind all of you, please turn off your cell phones, pagers, and any other electronic device, because that is really heard well here. And now to our scholar, Jennifer. Jennifer is an American historian specialized in studio-era Hollywood. She received her joint PhD in Film and American Studies from Yale University in 2005. Since then, she has taught in the History Department of the University of Warwick in Great Britain. And Professor Smyth is also the author of Reconstructing American Historical Cinema from Cimarron to Citizen Kane, published in 2006, Edna Ferber's Hollywood, published in 2009, and she's the editor of Hollywood and American Historical Film, published earlier this year by Palgrave Macmillan. She has written several articles about Fred Zinnemann's work, and during her residency at the Getty Research Institute, she's completing a book about Zinnemann's career. Please welcome Jennifer Smyth.
Thanks, Alexa. Welcome to the 60th anniversary screening of High Noon. It's not much of a stretch to say that High Noon remains the most loved and perhaps most hated of all Westerns. Hailed in critics in 1952 as a masterpiece that would outgun John Ford's Stagecoach, it quickly became a cultural and political lightning rod in the anti-communist witch hunts, which affected the careers of High Noon cast and crew members Howland Chamberlain, Floyd Crosby, Lloyd Bridges, and especially the screenwriter and uncredited producer, Carl Foreman. Paramount's Luigi Larashi wanted this film censored, and he complained that it was just an un-American polemic dressed up in Western clothes. John Wayne and Howard Hawks were allegedly so outraged by a hero who asks for help and only gets it from his wife that they made Rio Bravo in protest. But High Noon goes beyond politics. The fact that American political leaders on both sides of the spectrum voted their favorite film says something. For each new generation of audiences throughout the world, High Noon represents, like the lives and careers of Fred Zinnemann and Gary Cooper, a kind of isolated greatness in a world of constant change and in an industry which unfortunately often forgets its great successes and its roots. High Noon has endured in spite of the blacklist, in spite of critics who complained it wasn't a true Western, in spite of battles over the authorship of this film, and in spite of many others saying that the Western genre was finally dead. Tonight, we celebrate the film and the impact that many had in influencing its final look. Fred Zinnemann was the first to acknowledge that High Noon was, like any great film, the result of collaboration, the work of Carl Foreman's script and production advice, of Dmitri Tiomkin's score, Floyd Crosby's magnificent cinematography, Elma Williams' editing, and of star Gary Cooper, who took so many courageous risks in his portrayal of Will Kane. But we paid special tribute tonight to the director who pushed the limits of American film's most traditional of genres to create a new visual look for the Western, for turning a timeless, mythic genre into a timely narrative. This picture has no pretty cloud formations. Its skies are nearly white, and they have an aged look of a period documentary. Its main image of that great symbol of American frontier progress, the railroad, is of static, silent tracks full of menace. Instead, the lonely hero moves throughout the town, endlessly searching for somebody to back him up. And our hero wears black. He was aging, he was afraid, he sweated, he even cried in desperation during the film. You've perhaps had a chance to look at some of Fred Zinnemann's comments about his design for the film, even squinted perhaps at some of the annotated script pages, which I've reproduced here, courtesy of Linda Mayer and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Library, where the director's archive resides. In looking at his annotated script, which is for me truly one of the holy grails of American film history, we realized just how revolutionary this film was. In many minds, it has become the Western that was really a Hollywood polemic protesting the blacklist, resisting the intolerance that is unfortunately at the base of much of American politics. But as a Western that rethought the genre and its Western hero, it was equally as influential. Here, Gary Cooper and Fred Zinnemann were willing collaborators, and we pay tribute to them now. We're honored to welcome our very special guests tonight, Maria Cooper Janis, daughter of Gary Cooper, and of course Tim Zinnemann, son of director Fred Zinnemann. Both are going to join me immediately following the screening for a conversation and an audience Q&A, so get your questions ready. Some of you in this audience have known these two for a long time. Maria Cooper grew up just around the corner in Brentwood, the only child of Gary and Rocky Cooper. She pursued a career in painting and has exhibited all over the world. In 1966, she married the world-renowned concert pianist Byron Janis. Their work for charity, including the American Arthritis Foundation, is tireless. Maria's regard for her father's legacy is one of her very many wonderful qualities. She's written 2 books, Gary Cooper Off Camera, A Daughter Remembers, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and with Bruce Boyer, Gary Cooper, Enduring Style, which was published to great acclaim just last year. She has also collaborated on 3 TV specials, Gary Cooper, American Life, American Legend, The Life and Times of Gary Cooper, and Gary Cooper, The Face of a Hero. She's been working on another documentary recently, The True Jen, about the unique friendship which existed between her father and the writer Ernest Hemingway. She's also deeply committed to furthering Native American interests, something which links her very closely with her father's long-term concerns, and has started the Gary Cooper Scholarship for American Indians in Film and Television at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And in fact, USC is now the happy recipient of the Gary Cooper Archive. Every inch her father's daughter. Please join me in welcoming Maria Cooper Janis. Maria, please stand for a minute. And we're equally honored tonight to welcome back filmmaker and photographer Tim Zinnemann, the only son of Fred Zinnemann. Tim has worked on over 85 films in a career spanning 45 years. He's worked as an assistant editor, assistant director and producer of, among many other films, The Pink Panther, Farewell My Lovely, The Cowboys, The Great White Hope, Day of the Locust, Carnal Knowledge, The Reavers, The King of Marvin Gardens, The Long Riders, Straight Time, Smile, Tex, Running Man, and my personal favorite, Bullet. But I happen to know that his first paid job was as a wrangler and an extra on his father's Oklahoma. And as his father gleefully wrote to Tim's Uncle George, Tim took to that life like a duck takes to water. More recently, Tim has returned to his career as a fine art photographer and is preparing an exhibition and book for release in 2013. We're very happy tonight also to welcome his sons Oscar and Oliver again here in the audience. So please join me in welcoming Tim. Please stand up and smile. And if you'll bear with me just a further minute, we're delighted that so many of you that knew Fred Zinnemann and Gary Cooper are here tonight. It's a testament not only to the enduring power of this film, but to your regard for two true Hollywood legends. It would take too much time to introduce you all, but I want to draw special attention or name two more names. A.C. Lyles, who got his start in Paramount Pictures partially thanks to Gary Cooper, and who's been a close family friend ever since. He's been at Paramount, he tells me, 84 years, and more recently has been a consulting producer on the series Deadwood. A.C., could you stand for a second? And I have to say, I rigged the seating chart this night so that I could sit next to Walter Mirisch. He's in the audience as well, too. And it's one of the big thrills of my life to be doing that. He is the legendary producer of that other seminal Western, The Magnificent Seven. Mr. Mirisch also personally produced Man of the West, Hawaii, same time next year, and In the Heat of the Night. The Mirisch Corporation became the gold standard for picture making, responsible for Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment, West Side Story, The Great Escape, The Pink Panther, The Children's Hour, and The Thomas Crown Affair, among many, many others. So please join me in giving this remarkable man his due. Okay, you've been remarkably patient. Thank you. Please switch your cell phones off, and I'll just remind you that when the lights come up after the film is over, we're going to go immediately into the conversation, so keep your seats and get your questions ready. Thank you for coming.
Well, Tim, I'm going to start with you, actually. How did your father become involved in this project?
He had a 3-picture deal with Stanley Kramer, and this was the second of the 3 pictures. And I think from the first time he read the script, the first time he was very excited and immediately wanted to do the movie. So.
Mm-hmm. And Maria, what decided your father on High Noon?
Well, I think my father was always looking for a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And he really liked the feeling of this Western. There was something about it that was special. And he knew the work of Carl Foreman, and he knew the work of your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that combination just really appealed to him. He was very frustrated with a lot of the Westerns that were depicted. He said they're just so phony. You know, they don't come off as real. You know, the sheriff is drawing so fast he shoots his own foot off before he's gotten the gun out of the holster.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just everything, the elements in this really appealed to him for its reality.
Mm-hmm. And he and Carl Foreman became quite close in the course of the production.
Yes, he did. He and Foreman were very close. And in fact, Stanley Kramer tried to get my father and Fred Zinnemann to, I think, kick Foreman off due to all the Hollywood 10 and the communist obsession and all that. And I know my father got up and he said, if Foreman goes, Cooper goes. And he walked out of the office.
Yeah.
So, and he and Foreman subsequently, they wanted to go into another business venture together.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all signed and sealed to do it. And Carl actually said, well, Cooper's just going to be too difficult for you. And I don't know if your father was part of that, but
No, he wasn't.
but they stayed friends and they stayed in touch all the years.
Yeah. And there was no sense, I mean, in the beginning, I mean, the film was shot in 28 days. It was
28
September.
days.
Yeah. On a budget of $835,000.
And guess what the budget was? 700.
I think it was 835 it ended up.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And apparently nobody funded it. It was, you know the
I think
story
it was
better than...
lettuce growers out of Salinas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the man that funded it also insisted on your father being in it, if I remember correctly.
Smart move.
I've been told that my father was not the first choice.
Really? I
Yeah,
haven't heard that.
Yeah, they wanted, they were thinking of Montgomery Clift, and they were even thinking of Brando at one point. I was told this
Really?
by someone who did a lot of research on it.
Huh.
Yeah, but thank goodness.
No. I mean, but your father took, in a way, he took enormous risks with his image. I mean, he was obviously an incredible star. And this film, you know, you see him, you see his age, you see his fear.
Well, and you know, I think I never had appreciated how good an actor he was. I happened to be on the set the day that they shot the wedding scene.
Mm-hmm.
And
Get you back.
that,
There you are having ice cream head to you.
that morning, in fact, my father had, you know, he had a car accident when he was very, very young, and his bad back all his life. And that morning he'd put his back out. And anyone who has a sacroiliac back that pops out at inconvenient times, he was in terrible pain. And in that scene, he is married to his bride, and then he has to go and lift her up on that big highboard. And he was in so much pain, and I could see the sweat breaking out on his lip, but, you know, he had to be the happy bridegroom. And Grace was, you know, she was lovely, but she wasn't petite, and she wasn't a dancer. She didn't know how to lift herself up or help. It was heavy lifting, but I just admired his guts in that. Yeah. And of course there was a difficult time, and in many ways his health wasn't good. He had ulcers, all during the shooting of the film. Yeah. So I think his look of being not well, it wasn't just makeup. I mean, he was really going through a hard time in his life. But that story, he told me that it reminded him of the real people that he knew about through his father, who was a judge in Montana, in the Helena, Montana of 1910, 12, and on that. And it had such a ring of truth about it. And I think Carl Foreman was writing about a lot more than just what someone said, a simple little Western.
Yeah. Well, it was a very close production. I mean, many of the cast and crew members got along famously. I mean, Floyd Crosby and your father, Tim, were very close friends.
Yeah, they went back to the 20s, I think. Yeah. And that Crosby had worked for Flaherty, who in turn, my father was an assistant to in the early 30s. And
Robert Flaherty, the documentary.
Yeah. And so Crosby and my father were friends throughout both of their lives, through all of their lives. And in talking about how to shoot this film with Floyd, they were looking at old Matt Brady photographs, and they wanted to look like an old newsreel. And there was a lot of pressure from whoever the front office was at the time to change the look, and they thought the photography was lousy, and Crosby stuck to his guns and wouldn't change. And it was lucky because it was mostly shot on the Columbia Ranch in Burbank, and had they had beautiful clouds, you would have seen the Disney, you know, and everything else.
But your father had a very definite sense of how he wanted to structure the film. I mean, in terms of the dominant visual images, the train tracks, and
well, I mean, when he was on location, the first image that came to his mind was the static train tracks, and he wanted to juxtapose that with Cooper walking around, constantly pacing, and the clocks constantly ticking, so that the clocks was always a part of the structure of the film from the very beginning.
Now, Maria, you were on the set, and I believe somebody was watching you while you were with your father at some point, and you wondered who that young man was who was looking at you?
Oh.
Do you recall that moment?
You know, I don't really recall it, but my father would comment when he was coming home, when he would come back after several days' work. He said, "There's this young kid around, and he's following me all around, and he's hanging around the corner of the soundstage, and he never speaks to me." He said, "It was Jimmy Dean." And young Jimmy Dean was kind of absorbing, I think, and studying what little bits of business was Cooper doing, kicking the dirt or whatever else. And he always commented, he said, "I wish you'd come up and talk to me." He said, I'm very friendly. Yeah. But he was shy, and he didn't do it.
But Tim, you were on the set, I believe. You were taken once, did you tell me? But then you were at the studio preview. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, that was what I was thinking about in watching this now when everybody comes out at the end. After it was all over, it was the same situation at the preview. What happened, as I understand it, was that Kramer had the right to cut the picture and took it away from my father and recut it, I heard, rather brutally, and had music from start to finish that was a very loud music, Tiomkin's music. And I was at the preview in Long Beach, and it was an absolute disaster, and people were booing the screen, and others were laughing, and everybody left. And I remember basically the only people left in the audience were the suits from the studio, whatever studio it was. And I remember going to the bathroom after it was over with, feeling very badly and humiliated for my father. And I heard one of the suits in the bathroom say, "Well, what does a European Jew know about making Westerns anyway?" And so that night, all fingers were pointing at my father as basically the villain of the piece and the reason why the movie failed. And what happened after that was Kramer gave the movie back to Elmo Williams, the editor, to recut, which he did, and he restored it back to the original director's cut, and it went out that way.
But there wasn't really very much to cut. I mean, your father was famous for camera cutting.
Well, I mean, also they did shoot in 28 days, and they had a very tight schedule and budget. And because of his years in the MGM Shorts department, he knew how to be economical and be precise. And he had every shot written down in his script, and he stuck tightly to it. So there wasn't any fat in the picture at all.
These are some of his notes here on the clock inserts. He was sort of very definite about that being a major element in the film.
Yeah, well, it was designed that way. It's in the original script.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
There's a curious.
Yeah, you can see some of the.
There's a curious aside. I don't think you know about it. When I met Byron, my husband, we were married. The best man at our wedding was a man named Boris Shaliapin, who was the son of the great Russian singer. Mm-hmm. And we said to Boris, "Well, you know High Noon, don't you?" And the famous song. And Boris said, "No, I don't." And Byron played it on the piano, and Boris said, "Who wrote that?" And Byron said, "Well, that's Dmitri Tiomkin, this great thing." Boris said, "He didn't write that." He said, "That is old Russian folk song." And he proceeded to sing it in Russian with one note difference only. Tiomkin, I think, was famous for lifting. Very good. But it fits. It fits.
Now, your fathers became very close in the course of making this film, and they stayed close until your father's death, Maria. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? What drew them together? Why they clicked?
Well, my father didn't talk a lot about his personal feelings. I don't know if yours did very much. But I think those two fellows had some great silent rapport because they understood each other at a very deep level. And these photos you're looking at, they were taken at our home. I don't remember the anniversary, but Fred wanted to be remarried, have another ceremony with your mother in a Catholic ceremony, which he felt it meant a lot to her, and whatever that anniversary date was. So, in fact, it was the last time my father left the house, because he had cancer then, he was very ill, and he was in a lot of pain, but the ceremony was at Good Shepherd Church, and my father was the best man. And then we came back to our house there, and we had a wedding cake and champagne. And your mom and dad, that's in that picture there. And, you know, it was very, very strange. I believe people who have affection for each other are connected across time and space. And not even 5 minutes after my father died, the phone rang. And it was your father calling to see how he was. He was calling from the south of France. And, you know, hearing Fred's voice was just almost at that moment like hearing my father's voice. It was a very amazing moment.
And did your father ever talk to you about how he felt about High Noon and the film? I mean, was it his favorite? Did he ever say?
It was certainly one of his
Yeah.
favorites, and I think it spoke about something that was important to him. A friend of ours is a film teacher in New York, and I go to some of his classes sometimes and sit like a fly on the wall in the back of the school, and he shows High Noon, Shane, and The Unforgiven, and he has those three films as comparisons. And it really distressed me about some of the youth, which was, they were sophomore and junior college. A lot of them don't get it. They don't get why the sheriff came back to town. Well, he should have just kept on going. He was selfish to ask the town people to help him. What? And another comment that I really almost jumped out of my seat was well, he got off on killing, so what's the big deal? You know, and I don't understand why this generation seems to have difficulty with a film that shows someone who's moving and making decisions out of courage, having a moral position, and even the fact that, you know, in the scene where he's got the drop on the four guys and he calls out the name. I mean, he could have shot him in the back, but he doesn't. There's some code of honor that the sheriff has that makes him expose himself first and then use his skills as a gunman.
Well, Grace Kelly wasn't so scrupulous.
She lost it, yes.
Lucky she wasn't, actually.
Right.
But the film also, I mean, in the 80s, it had another life. It was sort of used as the poster for Polish solidarity as well, too. I'm trying to find some of the images. I couldn't resist, I have to tell you. I had to get some of her baby pictures on here.
It's not fair.
Yeah, I know that. I felt bad about it.
Where are Tim's baby pictures?
I showed those last week. You should have been here.
All right.
He put up with it pretty well, and I can't find it. It's a shame. It was early. It was showing earlier on the screen with PowerPoint.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
No, it was a wonderful tribute to, I think, to the story that the film imparts. That during the first elections in Poland, since the whole communist takeover and then the revolution, the first voting that the people of Poland had at the polling booths, they had the image of the sheriff walking down the street
See if
in
I
High
can
Noon,
find that.
and instead of a gun in his hand, he was holding a ballot. And in front of every single polling place, there was that image, and someone gave us a copy of it, of one of the original ones, and the background is sunflower yellow. It's really with the red.
Yeah. I'm
writing.
afraid I've got a different version up on the screen, but
That's okay,
it
no, but
approximates it.
It's good. It's very good.
Yeah. Right.
But I brought something. Fred and I kept in touch a lot over the years, and I brought a section of a little note that he'd written, a letter to me, and I just thought it might be nice for everyone here to read what he said. And this was in the context of something else, but this is the paragraph. It was written February 28th, 1993. I remember Pope Paul V saying about 20 years ago, quote, "The devil is around sowing confusion. The most dangerous thing about him is that he can make you believe that he doesn't exist." It really seems that this is a new era of rage and hatred that's dawning upon us and reaching biblical proportions. God only knows where it will end. Do you remember what Celine once wrote? Quote, "Human beings are islands, crying out to each other across oceans of misunderstandings." But I don't really see what good it does to go on yammering about all this. We can only hope that the human spirit will prevail in the end. And I just thought that's something that feeling sums up your father for me.
I would say that does completely. That's how he lived his life, really.
And it's about the films he made too,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
I mean, wasn't that part of what informed
Yes.
his movies?
Absolutely. In a nutshell, yes.
Well, thank you both. I think
Okay.
yes, and to be fair to the audience, I'd like to open this up to general questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand and the VSAs will come down and give you the mic. Don't be shy.
There's somebody.
Hi, a television writer told me that actually the film originally had a different title and that this may be entirely fiction, but I'm really curious to know whether it is true, and the film failed miserably until Fred came in and reinserted a 2-minute segment of the clock, and the film was renamed High Noon. Is that true or not? I'm curious to know.
Not that it was originally called The Tin Star. It was a short story in Collier's, wasn't it? Collier's?
Yeah, John
was-
Cunningham, yeah.
And there's some discrepancy about, I think Carl Foreman said that it was an original idea of his, and there was a coincidence that this story was like it, so they bought it so there'd be no lawsuit later. But it's either, some say it's based on the Tin Star, and others, or Carl Foreman said it was an original idea of his. So, but it was, as far as I know, it was always High Noon.
And I think in the original, Doan, as he's called, dies, I think.
Right.
And I think they renamed it. In the script, you'll see if you go to the Margaret Herrick and you have a look at his annotated script, it's all Doan. And even though it was the final shooting script, and I guess Cary Horado couldn't pronounce Doan's name, and they had to change it at the last minute. But no, he tended to camera cut, and the editing process is a bit obscure. I mean, the history of how that, emerged, how much, if Williams basically just patched it. But if you look at the script, as it's shot, there's one scene with a second deputy who is away, and this was just cut. Everything else,
It follows the
yeah,
script.
it's exact.
The movie's just like the script.
Right. Another question.
Since the film was set within an hour or so of noon, and I noticed that the shadows were pretty much overhead, were they restricted in how much they filmed during a day outdoors? And since it only took 28 days, I mean, did they shoot within an hour of noon and then go on to something else?
No, I mean, they shot from dawn till dusk, but I mean, and they were shooting on the back lot in Burbank. So, and they had haze or smaze or smog, whatever you want to call it. And so the light looked the same all day, pretty much. couldn't help it. Plus, they didn't use filters on so that made the sky blow out. So that's part of why it looks that way.
Another question.
Hi, I was curious. I know that Gary Cooper was not at the Oscar ceremony because he was on location. Who informed him that he won, and what was his thoughts? And was it a bigger honor? Did he think it was a bigger honor than getting the Sergeant York Oscar?
I don't recall him ever saying anything about comparing. I think Oscar is Oscar, and one is very proud to have it. He really wasn't sure that he was going to get it. He was in Mexico on location, and he knew he was nominated. And this is kind of a bit of my father's humor or subtle way of handling things. He knew he wouldn't be able to get away in case he did win. So he picked up the phone and he called his old, very liberal friend, John Wayne. And he said to him, he said, Duke, I'm sure I'm not going to get it, but if I do, would you mind picking up the Oscar for me? And of course he did, and Wayne did pick it up, and then he gave some odd speech about, I'm going to fire my agent because why the hell didn't I get this picture?
And he was one of the biggest critics against High Noon for
he hated
years.
it.
Yeah, he hated the picture.
Another question.
Hi, it's not exactly a question, but the picture was so stunning and so refreshing because there were parts that I'd seen it before many times, but there were parts that I'd forgotten, and the strength of the female characters in it was extraordinary and very rare and unusual for that time. And you saw a bit of Grace Kelly's gumption in it that didn't show in a lot of other pictures, but she did have it. And the relationship between her and Katie Girardo and that final scene between them, it was striking and beautifully directed, beautifully handled. It was very refreshing.
Couldn't agree more with that, that's for sure.
She was a wonderful choice.
Yeah, wonderful, yeah. I thought
Katie Girardo.
it was I think that performance holds up to this day. I mean, it's just a brilliant performance, personally.
Right, yes.
Gabby? What was the reaction from the Quakers after this movie was made?
Tim, you can answer that.
I have no idea, really.
I think we only know Howard Hawks' general reaction to the film and John Wayne's. Another question. Yeah, there's one down here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hi. I've come every Tuesday, and I really am enjoying the programs, and I'm trying to come next week. And you mentioned that it was shot mostly in Burbank. Was it because some of the scenes with the railroad, it seems like it's more in the country?
Right, no, that was done up in the on the west side of the Sierras in Sonora, where the train is. There's a train there in an old town. And I think they shot for 4 days up there, and then the rest of the time everything was done on the back lot, mainly because of expense and time constraints.
Tim, wasn't there almost a disaster when the train was coming and the smoke was the wrong color, and it was at the camp? It was
Right.
a very
Yeah, when the
moment.
train was coming towards camera, they had a signal. It started with white smoke and then changed to black. And the black was the signal that their brakes were failing and to get the hell out of the way. And they kept filming and they didn't know that was the signal. So the train kept coming and the camera kept rolling. And when it got dangerously close, apparently Floyd grabbed the camera and dove out of the way. And it wasn't until the train went by that my father realized that Floyd was safe. So,
Close call. Yes, one more question. Yeah? Or a couple. Right in front of you.
Hi, thank you for coming. It was wonderful to see it on the big screen. I was curious, you had mentioned that Mr. Cooper was having some back problems and some ulcers during shooting. Are there any stories in terms of the fight between him and Lloyd Bridges, how that was shot, or what kind of, if there were a stunt man involved at all, or how your father was affected at all? And because it looked like there was some decent tussling going on there.
Well, you would probably know.
There was a stunt. He had a regular stunt double that did a lot of the fight for him.
But he actually did a lot of that fight himself. And
Yeah.
wasn't there a problem with one of Lloyd Bridges' sons who was hiding?
Bo.
Bo was
Yeah,
there, yeah.
Bo was hiding in the barn. in
Yeah,
the
he
hay.
was in the loft, and when Gary Cooper threw water on Bridges, his son was roaring with laughter and ruined the shot. So.
In fact, a little aside, the man who was being shaved in the barber's chair in the beginning, and then the soap was scraped off him, that was my father's stand-in, a man named Slim.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that
Yeah, I think he was a double too. I mean, he was the
He was
flight
He did some
double.
double too.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Slim Talbot, his name was.
Another question.
I just wanted to say your comments about young people not understanding Kane's motivations. Well, we're 23 and we got it.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Another comment or question.
Maybe those were New Yorkers.
Come on. Another question.
Did either of your fathers have any? What did they think of Rio Bravo?
My father never said a word about it. I don't even know if he saw it, actually.
What did he think of Howard Hawks? That is actually recorded in his autobiography, Tim.
What did he think of Howard Hawks? He was a kind of a gentleman, he wouldn't say, I'm sure. I don't think he thought much of him. I think he falsely accused him of being a scholar, didn't he?
Yeah, I think at one point there was it's the old argument, of course, that Hawks said that in the real West, a sheriff wouldn't go around asking for help. He'd just do it. And in the real West, this would happen. And Zinnemann didn't follow the rules. He broke all the rules of the Western. And Fred Zinnemann was being interviewed, I think, in the 60s at this time. And he listened to this, litany of offenses he had allegedly committed against the Western. And he said, oh, yes, I'm sure Mr. Hawks is a great scholar.
I wonder how much time Hawks spent in the West that he was.
Other questions?
Ms. Janis, back on the Oscar question, that wonderful tribute you did to your dad for Turner Classic Movies, you commented that his favorite Oscar was the one he received for his body of work, and the one that Jimmy Stewart took for him when he was in your dad was in his last days. Were he and Jimmy Stewart good friends?
They were extremely close friends, very, very close. In fact, my mother and father introduced Jimmy to his one and only wife. Yeah, they were close. Jimmy and my father were also very much alike, and like your dad, of not, they kept a lot of stuff private. They weren't people who just spilt their own personal. They didn't share, but there was sort of a camaraderie and an understanding that they had, and Jimmy was. He asked Jimmy to accept the Oscar for him, and then they came over to the house, and it was, it was wonderful to be with the Stewarts at that point.
I have a follow-up, Ms. Janis. I brought my very favorite possession, a signed signed photo of your dad. I've had this for years, and I love it. Would you be willing to co-sign it for me tonight?
Oh, of course. That's lovely. Thank you.
Well, that's good. You can sign my copy of your book, too. Another question?
Oh, it's very emotional to see it on the big screen without commercials and like it's actually intended. I'm still reeling from that. I'm curious if you've seen any of the, quote, takeoffs or other movies like Blazing Saddles or others that take off on it and make fun of what your emotional reaction was when seeing those.
Do you watch Mel Brooks?
Well, my father made a lot of Westerns, so I kind of have a different look, or I have a different feeling about the genre of Westerns. High Noon stands on its own, in my opinion, as a very special film that has a lot more to say. So Mel Brooks, I think, is brilliant. I mean, that doesn't bother me because it's a takeoff on a lot of, very good stuff.
Do you want to skip that one, Tim?
I don't have an opinion. I'm sorry.
All right, another question. I thought I saw one. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
We'll see you next week with Julia.